Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to HOK's Up Next. My name is Stephen Burgos. I'm the Director of Design for Interiors in HOK's Miami studio. And for today's session, we're going to explore the topic of material and product selection, but not just any product or material selection. We really want to talk about smart, informed decision making that ensures designers and clients are choosing the best, longest lasting, and most cost effective materials and products for their project. And we're going to tell you a little bit about how we do that here at HOK. So, joining me today are two of my colleagues. We have Kristina, our Director of Design for Interiors based in Toronto, and she leads the design team on projects across our Canada region.
Hi, everyone.
And then we have Candon, our very special guest. She is our Firmwide Materials Resource Manager, and she is based in New York. And her role is to help design teams choose materials and products that are future focused, healthy, environmentally friendly, and cost effective. And this is not just a conversation amongst us. We want to get you online involved in the conversation as well. So please leave a question in the comment in the chat section, and we'll look to incorporate those during the conversation. So let's jump into it. So Candon, your job is fairly unique. I don't know of any other firm that has a materials resource manager in the capacity that you serve. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this role and what specifically you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true. Not a lot of firms have someone that does what I do, especially on the global scale at which I do it. So much so that sometimes even my own colleagues are like, what do you do here? So, my background education is in industrial design, emphasizing on furniture design. And then I studied interior architecture. And it gave me a really unique opportunity because frequently in architectural and design schools, we don't really learn a ton about materiality. It's been historically kind of mentored into your role as you gain an internship or become a junior on a team. This is something you learn on the job. Um, but I came into the design world at a time where, especially sustainability transparency information, was just kind of hitting the major products, um, and especially the interior design world. And no one really knew what it meant. So I started doing these research projects, and it kind of came naturally to me because I had a basis of understanding from industrial design school about kind of the chemical properties and performance of material types, like what's the difference between aluminum and steel and why would you choose those things. um, and so it was kind of easy for me to latch onto that. And although I did sit in a more traditional interior design, interior architecture role for the first few years of my career, I was getting these side projects doing materiality, and I just loved the deep research and problem solving for it. And I started doing it full time. And I was working for a very major coffee company, and I got the opportunity to do a lot of work in sustainability at that time. Also, this is around 2015, and research sustainability. And it became especially important to me at that time because of the grand scale that I was dealing with. I really felt the weight of the selections when you're talking about a million square feet of tile. We like it feels important to know where that tile came from and what it's doing, and does it have any risks associated with it. And it was a more important decision than just choosing the aesthetics. And so I have been doing it really ever since. So that's about 10 years now. I've been exclusively in materiality. And here at HOK, my role has kind of a variety of ways that I work. So I first and foremost, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I know, in this conversation, is that I support our leadership in trend forecasting with kind of socioeconomic concerns and data and stats. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, how does this relate to materiality? but it very much does. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. I also advise on especially our large scale projects, the ones that represent a lot of foot traffic or potential risk. So things like airports and stadiums and civic and government buildings. And I help those team members make sure they're looking at every aspect of materiality. So we're making sure that we're not only providing an ethically sourced and a healthy material, but also we have the testing, performance testing needed, and the guarantee that we are providing a safe place for our occupants. And then I also get to help with looking at beautiful upcoming products and materials. And I work with our vendor partners on a global scale to make sure that we get those things, kind of here and to the designers. So that's just kind of a snippet of what I have going on. And I know that we'll talk more about that in some of these other
Absolutely.
questions.
Thank you for that overview.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, like something that is really positions you, Candid, in a really unique way is beyond just having like a really in-depth view of material specifications and the importance for really understanding the technical details that come with that. We've really just benefited from having you as a resource across our studios to ask you pointed questions, to resource you on our projects. I think too, there's as a leader, it's important also to think about how like taking a deep dive and really caring about that. I think you are an inspiration to all of our studios about really wanting to know like the deeper meaning behind, again, the impact of specifying materials at a large scale, and even on a small scale as well. But I think another thing too that is very unique and so helpful for us creatives is really collaborating more in the early stages of a project beyond just the nitty gritty and the kind of technical aspect of specifying products and materials. You and I have collaborated on this before too. We think about like big and bold concepts that then impact how we design our projects. And also from the onset too, we look at, trends, forecasting, when organizations come to us from more of a design strategy standpoint and really thinking about conversations beyond just material selection and more about, design of space and major shifts and changes in the industry, that it will impact the future of the workplace looking like 10, 20, 30 years in the future. So yeah, just curious to know kind of, can you talk about how we've done that, how you guide us through that, what your lens is on more of that kind of big thinking, creative and more trend-based kind of data.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of fun. I know, Chris, you and I talking about some of these like theoretical things. Sometimes it's like looking into the future, like Star Trek style of trying to understand what's coming down the pipeline. When we have these clients that are making these huge investments, especially clients that are working on those like civic or government or like university projects or what have you, they're such long term buildings, they want to try and see into the future. So we look towards these data points to give insight. So I'm thinking about one that I was talking about with, I know one of your colleagues in Canada, Chris, about um, we are like looking ahead at the potential of a screen free future. Like technology is
Mhm.
moving in this way that we are not really sure if we're going to be interacting with a laptop. Like there is augmented reality and virtual reality and the potential and these like clear screens that are being theorized and coming to market. And so, like, what does a workplace look like in
Mhm.
20 years when we don't need to have a normal desk. And that's so fun to think about because then that really gets, Christina, you and your teams kind of, not doing the same thing they've always done or maintaining the status quo and thinking about what flexibility looks like in that space. And especially in
Yeah,
like
and
a workplace client, right?
exactly, and how that those concepts kind of get us out of our norm of designing physical space and an office with kind of standard solutions that we typically see. That's going to start to evolve and change, right? So studying those data points, even just being aware of them, is a one thing in terms of knowing where trends are headed in the next 10 plus years that will ultimately impact our experience of space. I think too, there's like an offset for that like tech heavy experience that's going to obviously really shift and change our experience in the built environment. And one thing that you and I kind of also, you helped us guide this research too, was when we're thinking about that evolution of technology and the impact that has on not only just your experience of space, but the wellness aspect too, and how sustainability, but also biophilic design is basically what we're kind of calling like the antidote to that kind of mix. And that's something that you kind of helped us guide through. And I guess too, like, can you just talk a little bit about how and where you find those data points? I know there's like multiple sources, but it's also a frame of view that you hold and how you go about doing that research, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, here at HOK, I have access to websites that provide data sets like survey
Mhm.
results in many different ways. And there's huge organizations that provide these. Actually, one of the biggest data sets that comes out that's free to the public that anyone can kind of Google comes from Deloitte. And they do their generational trend survey every year that has tons of interesting insights that a lot of companies use when they're thinking about recruitment of new employees. And so we kind of can take those interpretations of like, what does the up and coming group want to see? So, where are their values? And then so those employers can align those generational values to like compensation packages, for example, or the design of the office. And we saw this a lot, especially after lockdown. So many employers are trying to get everyone back to the office, but so many people were so comfortable in their home. And so then we start to look at why. What are the things that made people comfortable in their homes? And how can we bring that into the workplace without exactly mimicking a home? Because we don't want the workplace to be a home, right? But we want it to be something else. And so, how do we interpret those things? So, these data sets come from so many different places. I do have to say, this is where Kristina, you were mentioning, technical performance earlier in this question, and then these data sets. All of this data is kind of the same thing, and I guess you can kind of call me a
Mm.
data nerd because I kind of want the proof in the pudding. Or we use biophilic data, like for example, how humans react to biophilic patterns in their brains is in neuroscience, and we can use these interpretations from neuroscience to show our clients, yes, you are in the right direction because you are going to lower your employees' blood pressures by providing these patterns. And you kind of get the proof for those decisions, and it can almost help the design process be a little less foggy and like a little bit more pointed to where we're going. And then open up to your teams, both of your teams, Stephen and
Mhm.
Kristina, these opportunities for new inspirations that can help push design thinking a little bit deeply.
I think that's really well said, right? Because, our clients are looking for us to make smart decisions, and if that's built on a foundation of data, then right, you can't tip it over, right? It's going to stand, and we can carry that forward like through the design without kind of poking holes in it. Um, you said something really interesting earlier that I wanted to circle back upon. This idea of as we go more, into a tech-rich environment and technology is permeating everything, there's this kind of counterbalance, right, to things that are more kind of tangible in nature and biophilic. And I think by consequence of that, we are introducing a lot more different materials into our projects
Mhm.
that, as you mentioned earlier, there could be risk kind of involved in that. And is it the right material for said application? And I know specifically, Candon, you and I have worked on a very large stadium project where client really wants to drive hospitality forward. And so that means introducing a mix of materials that could be questionable for, very high traffic areas. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit about, how, we interact in that instance and how you can help mitigate risk for projects and clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that is one of the places where it seems this role provides the most value. It's probably the top value in this role, is this kind of quality control check work that I do with the teams. And it's less about telling the teams what is wrong or what is right, and more offering solutions that could be better. Every once in a while, it ends up like this is wrong, but that's that's rarer the occasion. Because first of all, here at HOK, we prioritize health and sustainability. It is part of our history as a firm, but a material isn't sustainable if it doesn't last for the project type, right? And the stadium that Stephen was just mentioning is also in like a high weather zone where we have to like consider the potential for weather getting in. And so it's this, and also it's a stadium, so people are, having a wonderful time. They might be spilling things, they
Mhm.
might be, overjoyed or very sad about what's happening with their teams, and that can, like, affect the performance of materiality. So how do we balance these decisions? And it's really about looking at what is going to get the design intent through while performing at the needs. And that's where I really support the teams. Is the team, like Stephen is saying, is trying to provide a luxurious hospitality, but how do we make sure the materials have the feel of luxury and the performance needed in the space? And that is really where I dive in and help and do deep research. So maybe the designers might come and say, we're looking at an upholstery for something in a restaurant that's high end, but it's also, half open to the outdoors. Maybe we have a
Mhm.
full open wall, and we need to make sure that that material is going to perform in weather, because somebody might forget to close that wall, or maybe that wall like
Mhm.
breaks eventually. And then, um, we have this kind of dance that we need to do. So
Mhm.
having someone like me dedicated to this technical research that really knows what to look for, can help to take a little bit of the weight off the team so they can focus on, pursuing the design and some of the other materials that might be, a little bit easier, have less data points to look at, to specify, and also provide them with a, like a little yellow flag waving if we maybe get a little bit far in one direction, and someone just to be around and say, okay, maybe we should revisit this detail, this material, this consideration. Maybe we need to pivot focus. And sometimes that is just enough help, just someone kind of coming into a meeting and saying, okay, this is great, but have you thought of these other three ideas? And then the team
Mhm.
can go back and kind of um, noodle on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's like another layer, I think, of quality control too, that is so deeply valuable, right? There is a technical QA/QC with our drawing packages and things like that, but this puts such a like a lens on more of that detail and product understanding that I think is like a bit of a gap, to be honest, in with a lot of, I guess, creative expertise where we have, technical knowledge, but this almost expands it to a whole other level. I think to another concept that that kind of tags on this would be the idea of like global supply chain and sourcing that has been
Mhm.
of a concern the past, and a challenge, to be honest, and a challenge for us to overcome the past few years, especially post pandemic. But I think even as that continues to evolve currently in the current sort of climate, we also lean on you to understand supply chain and solving those issues and connecting with vendor reps to understand how we can kind of overcome those challenges. Maybe just talk us through like how you help our teams with that, what those challenges are, and what we can continue to do and look for to avoid kind of future headaches with specifying
Mhm.
material products.
As much as much as supply chain stresses are stressful for everyone, it's funnily enough been kind of a point of job security recently for, I think, a lot of us, because it gets so complicated. And we saw it, in 2020 as things kind of locked down and got diverted and we had to pivot quite a bit. I mean, people watching this call saw it as consumers, right? This is not anything. So we have this happens all of the time, and sometimes just on smaller scales. And just right now, it's been on a larger scale. And having insights into where things truly come from and where the manufacturing
Mhm.
happens, because that's really part of this material research. Also, sometimes it's part of sustainability, but sometimes it's also part of needing to like be able to explode a chair in your mind and understand that these different bits and pieces are coming from different continents, and where there could be potential disruption due to socio-political anything that affects the supply chain. And then being able to kind of pivot and say, well, this chair in a year might be a problem getting sourcing for, but maybe we have these other five manufacturers that would be good to keep as backup. And that's kind of also where I help to manage our vendor relationships from a firm wide perspective, is and getting the insights from those people is understanding that our manufacturing partners are just that. They are our partners. We cannot
Mhm.
build these buildings without these materials. And so having an open line of communication that's really honest and giving as much insight as possible to what we have coming so we can get the manufacturers aware of what's coming down the pipeline. And then in turn, they have an open line to me that I can communicate out to the firm of like, we're like potentially looking at a 5% cost increase in 4 months. Great. Now I can share that with the firm. Everyone knows we can get these, early. Um, and it can really help to like pivot and mitigate. And also, some things that we're dealing with right now, specifically Kristina talking about you and our colleagues in Canada, is
Mhm.
understanding that there's so many things historically that have been shipped into the US from the EU and then up to Canada. But because now we have some extra monies that are needed to make that happen, how can we divert and get things shipped directly into Canada from the EU, which is something that a lot of people are already working on. So it's just like understanding at what point those folks are at and then getting you connected with them as we find more information and we kind of constantly pivot. So it's interesting because the role can although dealing a lot with chairs, can get a little political sometimes.
Absolutely.
Candon, can we dig a little deeper on the sustainability lens? Obviously we're, picking pretty things and stuff, but, at HOK, we want to be responsible stewards and we're having these conversations with our clients. Can you just share a little bit about, how we ensure that the materials are not just beautiful, but, they're also healthy, they're environmentally responsible, and, how we're even like documenting that in our projects?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is something that we talk about as a firm a lot because we have a really interesting materials initiative that I help to lead and mentor and usher, but is actually led by quite a few people in the firm. And I won't go into like the super details of this on this call. You can actually find that on the HOK website. We have a great short video that kind of explains it. But essentially, we have been working for the last 5 years to really help our designers firm wide understand what transparency documentation is available for materiality and how to understand that and how to look for it and prioritize in a very kind of simple way. And that was really brought forth by many, many folks in the sustainable architecture and design world. There are consortiums of people from all different firms that work on these initiatives and try to help get us as a practice to move in the right direction. And we at HOK really lean into that and support that. We spend a lot of time um, working groups and advising nonprofits and things like that. And that's not just me; that's quite a few people. Um, but the data points that we're looking at, just to kind of give you some insights, are the Common Materials Framework, which was brought forth by Mindful Materials and has now been latched onto by many different organizations within the design world. And we teach that we have it kind of implemented into our design process that sustainability
Mhm.
and wellness is never outside of our consideration. It's almost like durability first and then health, because it should never really be outside of it. And then lead time and cost and like all of these things, this is all one big ball that we have to really look at all these data points to make the right selections. And at the same time, we're kind of keeping an eye out for new innovations in materiality and trying to get them in where they can when they're fit. And we do use a lot of different databases and information from scientists. We're not doing this alone. I know that there was a question that came in the chat on LinkedIn about Ecomedes. Absolutely, one of the databases that are used to do these material research, along with Mindful Materials, that is kind of sunsetting now. But there are other, you know, groups like Building Green that provides us with education, Building Ease, which is a database that's coming to market that's new, Ace Lab that's coming to market that's new, as a great database for finding materials. So we have a lot of different resources, and we kind of teach people to use like what works best for them, and working with the manufacturers to make sure that happens. It's a bit complicated, which is why we do have a handful of people that lead this. I'm not the only one at all, because different people learn in different ways and we have to find different ways to teach them. And so, really, this is about making sure that we teach designers how to select the right materials with all of these data points included. I know that was a complicated one. So hopefully that
It's a complicated topic, right?
it's
So yeah, we
hard.
have to
It's a
kind
hard
of
one.
break it down into, we'll probably do another one of these where maybe we dive a little bit more into
We could talk about that point alone for 90 minutes. And in fact, I did at an in-person talk last week, 90 minutes of just that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when we're speaking about that topic, it is relevant to kind of all the topics that we've been talking about so far. But I think too, because you have such of that bird's eye view across the whole firm, across many regions, right? Across the HOK as a firm, a firm-wide initiative of really thinking about design forecast and trend forecasting. So just how does that help identify product trends or early new innovations that our team should be thinking about before they hit mainstream? So if you just have any ideas or concepts around that.
Yeah, this is like the funnest part of my job, I'm gonna say, is when I get to visit the trade shows or the vendors come to me with like a concept chair that I need to sign an NDA for, and they want to understand if like I see this being a popular item. And this is, I think, the most fun for me because I was always really passionate about art history. I kind of actually wanted to be an art historian, but I don't know, you can't really pay your bills being an art historian. So here we are. But it's kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, so my job really is to be the voice of the 400 designers that I support within HOK worldwide. I keep an eye on what the clients are asking for. I keep an eye on what the designers themselves are asking for. I see what they're posting, the pictures that they send me, the renderings that they make. And then I take that information. I'm almost like kind of the vessel for these 400 designers and what they're asking for. And then I go to the trade shows or the manufacturers, and I kind of just am looking for these things from that perspective. Like, what are our clients wanting? Because I do see these early conversations and these trend forecasts and things like that, and then it provides a really fun opportunity to keep an eye out for new and emerging manufacturers that might be making really cool stuff but maybe don't have the financial footing yet to really get into the design world and help to usher them through. I'm actually in the middle of a conversation right now with a group that's created a commercially rated leather alternative product that's made of mycelium, which is fascinating. And we've been keeping an eye on mycelium based products for a long time. But it's interesting because they're just getting to scale. And when you have 26 offices of
Mhm.
designers, when you have 400 designers, I can't just throw that mycelium leather to every designer in the office and be like, use it, because that company is going to get overwhelmed, right? So it's this kind of like dance of understanding what's going to be successful. How can we set up all of these things for success? Where are the appropriate places to use these materials? Where do we find opportunities to bring forth and advocate as HOK for new innovations in materiality and sustainability and ethics and sourcing? And it's just this really kind of fun dance that I play, that is always inspiring to me. And I'm always asking the designers to like send me the stuff that you're finding online, even if it's AI. I want to make it real. Like, let's figure out how to do it. Let's figure out how to make those problem materials that we really don't have a sustainable alternative for sustainable.
Mhm.
Like, let's challenge the manufacturers to create these things. Let's create the demand. Let's pivot the industry by asking hard questions about the materials and products that we're using.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of where I get the most fun, because it's almost like the search, the hunt, the problem solving, and then getting to see these things come to market over my career has been fascinating. Like, just mycelium based products alone were a dream 7 years ago. They were theoretical, but we couldn't buy them. And then we could kind of buy them, but they weren't performing that well. So we couldn't put them in commercial. And now it's like, oh, we have opportunity that's coming really soon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very
Yeah,
fun.
that's actually interesting. That concept of like products that are new to the market and being developed, right? And even positioning HOK, again, as a large firm, to have that level of impact and almost substance to bring kind of concepts and ideas and even challenges to the market, right, with specific questions. And Candon, you've kind of taken that on and been kind of the voice for the firm in a lot of ways in those direct relationships with our vendor partners. How would you say that has evolved or changed at your time here at HOK?
I think that we're getting more and more connected. And to me, this isn't necessarily a thing that exists at HOK, like a problem that exists at HOK. I think that in 2020, when so many of us went home and stayed home for a while, a, a, the A&D world was so integrated with the vendors and manufacturers and the designers and even engineers and MEP, just kind of all of that. And it seemed like, and this is not unique to architecture and design either, it just kind of got very split off when we went home culturally. And so I almost see myself as like the reconnector, trying my best to make um, these lines of communication more open again and more in person and more
Mm-hmm.
visual and getting more people to trade shows, because the trade show traffic
Yeah.
went down
Mm-hmm.
considerably and is still not all the way up, back to what it was before. And we are humans that create spaces for humans. We need to be able to see these things in real life. We can't shop exclusively from screens. And so, and we shouldn't want to shop
Yeah.
exclusively from screens.
Mhm.
Like you can't feel texture on a screen. You don't
Yeah.
know what something is going to smell like on a
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
screen. Like these
Mm-hmm.
things are
Yeah.
all inputs in the built environment. And is it too big? Is it too small? I like to sometimes joke that like some chairs sit big. They look small when you see them, but when you sit in it, you're like, oh, this actually sits big. So
That's right.
we need those kinds of those in-person interactions, and it's something that I just personally love in my personal life. I spend as much time with art and sculpture specifically as I can, and in theater, and getting those sensory inputs. And so encouraging those for the firm and trying
Mm-hmm.
to get things in front of people,
Yeah.
to make their designs better when they might not even know that it's an option, is really, really, I think, the goal with connecting the vendors.
Totally. And
Yeah.
even like the presence at trade shows, to your point of the like
Yeah.
just the shift back to the importance of that and really like reiterating that to our studios. I think that's really key,
Mhm.
is that experiencing product in person, not just showrooms in your local city. That's important as well. And we're really encouraging the return to that, again, outside of that cloistered kind of selecting material and palettes from a screen and evolving that to be a much more back to that tactile experience again. But I
Mhm.
think to your point, trade shows are such an important aspect of connecting to product, to innovations, to new ideas, to concepts, but then also to people, right? Like we even met,
Mhm.
Candon, you and I, we've worked together virtually for a few years, and then
Yeah.
meeting for the first time in person this spring at a vendor tour was just so wonderful, right? Like
Yeah.
connecting over that even together as designers is very impactful.
Yeah, we get to know each other really well at trade shows. It's so funny because I like what I like, right? But I also say it doesn't matter what I like, because it's about what the client needs and what it is. But also, I'm supporting other designers. So, one of the things I do, especially if I'm walking around with colleagues like you, Christina, and Stephen, is just understanding what you like and what you're seeing and what are those details. And I might ask a question about that, like
Mhm.
why do you like that chair leg, or like what is it about that? And it's just this kind of input that helps inspire me to make sure that I'm seeing what other people are seeing. And then I
Mhm.
can start to, interpret what you might be thinking and then get those things into your inbox easily.
Yeah, that's
Love
great.
that.
Well, this has been so fun. Honestly, we could just yap for
Yeah.
another hour. It's
Yeah.
been
And
really
we do.
lovely just having, yeah, these pointed conversations. And thank you to everyone who has joined us today, virtually and online. This has been, I think, great for us, but hopefully helpful for you. It's offered insights to materials, product selection, and how this can be more than just a design necessity and really a strategy for delivering smarter, longer lasting solutions for our projects. So if you have any more questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll try to follow
Mhm.
up and get to them, but be sure to follow Candon, Stephen, myself here on LinkedIn, and keep the conversation going. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time on HOK Up Next.
Thank you
Bye.
all.
Thank you.
Bye.